What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today's video is going to be a product review. I have been driving my BMW a lot more now lately, and I've been having some intermittent issues where I haven't check engine light come on. Sometimes it comes on and doesn't really affect anything. Other times I've been having it come on and then immediately afterwards I've been having issues where it like stalls out when I'm trying to pull away from a light and like almost dies. And I have scan tools. I work on cars. I you know, like I've talked before, I teach automotive, so I have access to scan tools at work. I have my own scan tool here at home, but I don't always want to have those with me or leave them in my car because they're expensive scan tools, and I don't want to just leave that stuff in my car. So I went looking for a cheap option for a scan tool, and I found one on Amazon. The scan tool I've used a couple times now, and I like the scan tool. It works really good and it's pretty cheap. I will post a picture of it here on the channel or here on the video right now. And I am also going to post a link in the description down below so you guys can go purchase this if you would like to. But I needed that scan tool a couple times just out in public just so I can know what kind of fault I'm getting and what issue I'm having. And one of the issues I was having was so intermittent that it would mess up while I was out driving, but then by the time I got home and pulled fault codes out of it, I had nothing. Like there was no fault code stored in it and I was having issues. So I would like to have a scan tool kind of in the car on the moment that can do, you know, a little bit more than just pull fault codes. So this scan tool is capable of doing that. I can actually pull up graphs and look at things. So we're going to jump to hooking the scan tool up to the car, and I'm going to show you some of the stuff that it can do. All right, so the scan tool we're going to be looking at today is going to be this Kingbolen YA200. Like I said, I'll post a link down in the description of the video showing you guys, giving you guys access to be able to purchase this for yourself. This guy's like $27 shipped from Amazon. Pretty good deal. It's capable of quite a bit, so let's get it hooked up. My key is currently turned on my car, so I'm going to show you guys how quickly this thing kind of boots up and gets into doing what it's supposed to do. And we're ready to diagnose, so it's pretty quick. Some of the things, this is going to be your main menu here. So you have diagnosis. This actually is where you go into like pull fault codes and stuff out. You have Dtc Lookup here, which you can look up some information on the DTCs that you pull out on the diagnosis side. We have settings and then battery. Battery allows you to pull up like a graph of the actual battery charge level in the car, and you can kind of graph it out while you're driving it down the road. Settings just sets up like the language of the scan tool, the units of measurement, stuff like that. So we're gonna hop into the diagnosis side of it so we can pull fault codes out. So the first thing this does is actually does like a communication test with the car and to figure out which communication protocol it's got to communicate on. This is actually pretty quick out of scan tools that I've used in the past. This is relatively quick communication, so we'll jump right in there. So we come to this first screen here where you can see that the mil status is currently on. My DTC count or diagnostic trouble code count is 1. My monitor okay says 8, and my monitor incomplete is 0, and my monitor not available is 3. And then the ignition type is spark. So those monitors that it's referring to here are actually your emissions monitors that these cars have built into. So any car built after 1996 is going to have emissions monitors in here, and that's what your states use in order to know whether or not you're passing state inspection. So from here, we're going to hit OK. When you jump past that, you'll go into this section. This is actually the communication channels that the scan tool is communicating on. I normally try to pick the first one because the scan tool is kind of default to the one that they know they're supposed to communicate on. So we'll click on this module 12 up here, and then we can click on read codes. So you have the option of stored or pending codes. Pending codes are ones that haven't currently happened or have happened once but haven't happened enough times to store. That would be a situation like what I'm talking about where I'm out in public and the car starts doing weird things. It hasn't happened enough times to actually set a stored fault, but it might be in there under pending. But let's look at our stored codes because I actually have a light on now, so we can pull up our stored codes. And in my case, I have a P0444, which is an evaporative emission system purge control valve circuit open. So you can use this to actually go into service literature and figure out what you're supposed to test for this and what this is referring to. I'll actually go back out and show you on the DTC Lookup. It can give you a little bit more information in there as well. But we'll go back a couple pages. In here you have access to live data. And then it gives you the option in live data to look at every single thing in the data list, which is everything that the engine control computer is reporting back to the scan tool. Or you can go in here and graph displays of individual things. So in the all data stream, here it says hold OK for 2 seconds to move the selected item to the front, which I should move it to the top of the list. Wait for this to pull up. And then we can see we have DTC, mill status, ECT is going to be engine coolant temp. This is short-term fuel trim, long-term fuel trim on bank 1, engine RPM, vehicle speed, intake air temp, things like that. So you can see that there's a pretty long list. You can look at your oxygen sensor voltages, things like that. And then in the graph display, you can actually pull up. So say we want to look at engine RPM. Actually, we can do this. Let's do engine RPM. And then when you hit OK on there, you have to hit the back button to actually start to chart it. So right now we're at 0 because we have no engine running, but if we start the car up, say my engine RPM starts graphing out on this graph. Sorry, get you in the screen there so you can see everything. So we can see engine RPM showing up on the screen. That's just a chart of, like, you can see our engine start there at the kick up, and then it kind of stabilized out and it's down. If you were to rev the car up right now, you would see this chart or this graph go up. You're also seeing the actual digital readout here at the top of the engine RPM. One thing that this can be beneficial for is if you're having a drivability problem like what I was talking about before, you can actually look at things like engine RPM. So our engine RPM is reported from the crankshaft position sensor. So if you had an issue with the crankshaft position sensor dropping out, you could pull it up on that graph and you could see where, if you were driving and all of a sudden the crankshaft position sensor stopped transmitting information back to the engine computer, you could see it drop out on that graph and know that that's what your problem was. Same thing could happen with like intake air temp or mass airflow sensor readings, things like that, throttle position, any of the things in this list. You could be able to see on a graph if that signal randomly drops out while you're driving. The other thing that you can do is you can actually record up to 3 different channels on this scan tool while you're driving, so you're not having to look at this display while you're driving. So you can actually set up these individual channels. Actually gives you the option to select which ones you want to put into a memory slot. So say I want to record engine RPM, and then you have 3 memory slots, so you can put the engine RPM into the memory slot. You can see it's actually recording our engine RPM over time, so you can drive around with this hooked up and not have to look at this and record and then go back and look and see if the reason why you're having an issue is because your RPM signal is dropping out. Just some of the cool stuff that this scan tool is capable of doing. So you also have this freeze frame data option, which a lot of scan tools do. This normally allows you to see the freeze frame information from when you had a fault happen. This is actually showing it, right? Okay, so it is actually showing us freeze frame data from when P0444 happened the last time. Our engine coolant temp was 185. It shows you your fuel trims, things like that. So sometimes fault codes that you have might be temperature or like engine, other engine parameter specific. So you can kind of look at the freeze frame data and see what else might be causing that fault code to happen. You also have the ability with the scan tool, if you have a new enough car, to look at vehicle info. I don't have the ability to do this because I have an older vehicle, but you can go in here and pull up your VIN number and stuff like that. We have IM readiness, which is, this is actually your state inspection stuff. So this actually shows that all my things checking for emissions have checked off and are okay. I use these things in these little scan tools for after I do repairs to go make sure that I can do a drive cycle and make sure that when I come back I can pass state inspection when we come back to the shop. So go back a couple screens. We have an O2 sensor test and a component test. My car's too old to be able to do any of this stuff with, so I can't really show you guys those things. We're gonna back out to the main screen here, and then we're gonna go to Dtc Lookup. And if you go into Dtc Lookup, you can put in your fault code. So I'm gonna do generic because the fault code I had was a generic fault code. And we're gonna type in or scroll up to the fault code that I had. And sometimes, depending on what it is, it'll give you a code definition of what it is, which we kind of already got in the OBD2 side of it when we were looking at the fault code with the scan tool. But it also is giving you this thing at the bottom, which is possible causes, which is trouble code to appear if ECU detects there is an open in the evap system solenoid control solenoid circuit. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what causes that fault code to happen, and that applies to any fault code that might be stored in here. So like I said, pretty cool little scan tool. If you have the manufacturer specific fault codes, it also has a database for those as well. I don't have any of those today, so I can't really show you any, but pretty neat little scan tool, relatively cheap. I'm gonna leave this thing sitting in the car and just hold on to it, or just keep it in the car, so if I ever need it out in public, or a friend of mine someplace needs a fault code pulled, I just have this thing and, you know, on me. So hopefully you guys like this product as well. Like I said, there'll be a link down in the description for you guys to go purchase it if you like it. Other than that, I'll see you guys later.